Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the bonus video on potting media. And I just wanted to note that extra potting media like peat moss, perlite, orchid mix, these are really great for soil texture and drainage, but they actually don't contain any nutritional value in themselves, which is why it's always good to mix them with a good quality potting soil, because only the soil really has nutrition in it that's going to feed the plant. And another important thing about soil is it contains microorganisms. Now these millions and billions of good bacteria and little tiny microscopic organisms and bugs are actually also going to feed the plant. Some microorganisms produce hormones that help the plants to grow, and they also break down the food in the soil and they break down fertilizer for the plant. So that's why it's really important that you always need that soil element. I mean, sure, you can grow plants in artificial media, for example, in those cucudama balls. I mean, it's basically just sphagnum moss. And they'll grow. I mean, you can also grow a delicious monster just in water. But you're going to have to keep on fertilizing it, because otherwise there's no other way to get nutrition. And for me, I don't feel that in the long term that's going to be the best for a really healthy, lush looking plant that's going to last a long time. So there are two things that I use that are also frequently used in the industry to feed the soil, and these are called potting amendments. They are different to fertilizers because fertilizers feed the plant, these feed the soil. The first one is rock dust. So rock dust basically comes from volcanic rock. And years ago, ancient civilizations, they'd farm along the slopes of volcanoes, even though there was a risk that the volcano was going to erupt, because that soil was so fertile from the volcanic ash. And also in the ice age, basically glaciers, thick glaciers covered the Earth's crust. Underneath those glaciers was when the soil formed, and it was really, really healthy. Then the glaciers melted and the planet was so fertile. I mean, that's where we started having the Amazon basin grow and all of these amazing plants that came up. But over millennia, the soil has been seriously eroded, really due to weather, poor farming practices, overgrazing. So this rock dust really, it contains all those original good minerals that are used to feed the soil. So this is something, it's a powder, and that's also usually the difference between a soil amendment and a fertilizer. A fertilizer will either be in liquid form or in pellets, whereas a soil amendment will be in the form of a powder. So this is what the rock dust looks like. And you can really just add, I would say, about a handful per pot this size, or a handful and a half, and you just mix it in with your soil. The other soil amendment we can add is bone meal. Now bone meal is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically crushed up animal bones. But those crushed up animal bones are full of nutrition, especially phosphorus. Phosphorus is one of the main elements that plants need, and phosphorus is great for root growth and for really healthy, vibrant leaves and flowers. So again, it can be a little bit stinky, and also if you're going to use bone meal in your garden, just beware of pets, because they're kind of attracted to it and they are going to scratch around and stuff. So yeah, you could also add just a handful of this for a normal sized pot, a handful and a half. And you just do that once at the beginning of the growing season. Right, so I also want to touch on lacquer again. I know it was also in the bonus video, but we can use lacquer at the bottom of the pot. You can also use something like gravel. For outdoor pots, a lot of people just use gravel as an extra drainage layer. That's fine. But what's nice about lacquer is because it's absorbent, it's actually going to absorb the fertilizers. So when you use a liquid fertilizer, you pour it in, a lot of it actually drains out the drainage holes. But when you have laker balls mixed in your soil, and also perlite to some extent, because perlite is also porous, it absorbs that excess liquid fertilizer so that the plant can keep on feeding off it. So it's really, really good to add a layer into the bottom of your grow pot. So yeah, so I've done that, and I want to just show you how I'm going to repot. This is a Philodendron nangaritense, and I'm going to plant it with a plant pole. So plant poles are really great for aroid plants, your philodendrons, monsteras, anthuriums, alocaceous. And basically, because they vining, so they need support, and also they're going to produce aerial roots as they vine up. And these aerial roots, when you have this plant pole, the aerial roots can actually find purchase in here, and you keep this plant pole wet. So you can either water down or mist it, keeping it moist, and so that moisture feeds the aerial roots, so you can have a much stronger, much healthier plant. So what we're going to do is I've added my drainage layer, and I'm going to take this out of the pot. And so this pot's a little bit bigger, so I'm going to need to add a little bit of soil. I'm going to add the hemp super soil. Right, so I've added my hemp super soil in there, a little layer at the bottom. And what philodendrons and monsteras and other aroids love is kraal manure, the stinky stuff, because they grow on the forest floors of jungles where you're going to get so much of that rich organic matter. Kraal manure is really black, like it's a really, really dark colored soil. I'm just going to put my gloves on. I'm a really hands-on type of gardener, so often I don't even use gloves, and I don't bother with things like potting scoops and all of that. Yeah, I like to get hands-on, but anyway, that doesn't have to be everyone's vibe. So I'm just gonna, in my hand, I'm gonna put a nice handful of this kraal manure in to feed my philodendron. So that kraal manure is also a great soil amendment. Now, I'm going to want to put this in at the same time as the plant pole. And it's good to put your plant pole in when you are repotting your philodendron, because if you try to squish it in, then it's going to damage the roots. So it's good to do it while you're repotting anyway. And then you can leave a gap at the back of the pot here, and then you can easily just slip this in without damaging any of the roots. So I've pretty much filled this guy up with soil, and I've tucked his little climbing pole in. There we go. It's far too full. Again, I keep on doing that. I'm going to have problems now because the water's going to spill over the pot. Let me just show you, case in point. You see how annoying that is, which is why you want to keep that gap. So anyway, just another quick thing that I'm going to add to my soil. This is called Diatomaceous Earth. So Diatomaceous Earth is made out of the exoskeletons of diatoms, which are like phytoplankton. So they're found like at the bottom of the ocean and dried up ocean beds. And they're like really, really sharp. So what happens is when bugs crawl over the diatomaceous earth, it actually shreds them. So this is a really amazing organic pesticide. So you can add it to your soil, and this is great for fungus gnat larvae. So in winter, fungus gnats, I find, are a bit of a problem because it's cold and your plant's not drying out enough, and fungus gnats love that moist soil, that moist environment. And what happens is the fungus gnats lay their larvae in the soil, which is bad because those larvae can eat the roots. So if we just sprinkle some of this diatomaceous earth in the soil and just dig it in a bit, down into the roots that's really going to take care of any worms or larvae or anything like that. Diatomaceous earth can also be sprinkled onto your plants. So if you've got spider mites or mealybugs or anything, try sprinkling it over your plant, and it will also help deter those pests. So this is a great amendment to also just add to your soil. This is my rescue Watermelon Peperomia, and it's really struggled this winter. Watermelon Peperomias hate the cold. So if yours has also been really miserable this winter, that's probably why. Also in winter, they're going to suffer from overwatering. They really need to dry out a lot. I mean, these leaves are super thick and fleshy, which means that the plant is able to store water. So I don't think that this needs a bigger pot, also because of the overwatering situation. So I don't want to give it too much soil and too much room, but I do want to refresh the soil. So repotting doesn't always mean I have to go up to a bigger pot size. I can just do it in the same pot. So I'm really just gonna take it out, and you can see the soil looks pretty stale. It's lost its dark rich color. Yeah, it's just not so great. So I'm just going to loosen up a bit so there is room for the extra soil. So first I'm going to put a layer of lacquer at the bottom because peperomias love good drainage. And then I'm also going to mix some succulent soil in with my hemp super soil. I'm going to do a half-half mix. Just because the succulent soil will also aid in drainage, and peperomias are a succulent type plant. I wouldn't add kraal manure to something like a peperomia because succulent type plants generally don't like too much rich soil or fertilizer. Succulents actually grow, in rocky, slopey environments that aren't going to be really rich in organic matter. I've sort of refreshed the potting media of my peperomia. Now I have a few options when it comes to fertilizing. Now we have liquid fertilizers that you normally dilute with water and you pour it in. This is a Pocon bioplant food. Seagrow is also really good. Then you also get fertilizer pellets. Now the difference between fertilizer pellets and a liquid fertilizer is that the pellets are going to provide a long-term release of nutrients. So these pellets will sit on top of the soil or just below the surface layer, and they're going to get eroded over time as you water. They're going to break down and slowly release nutrients into the soil. So this is really great because it's long-term, and you know that for the next 2 months, basically it's going to be slowly feeding your soil. You don't have to worry about it. So if I just sprinkle a layer on top, and never put the fertilizer pellets too close to the stem. You don't ever want to overcrowd the stem, so just sprinkle them lightly around the outer areas of the pot. You can also add, although you don't want to over fertilize, but you can also add then a dose of liquid fertilizer. But now if you're just using a liquid fertilizer, you've got the problem of the fact that it's probably just going to drain a lot of the nutrients out, which is why it's good to add something like lacquer or perlite to absorb the excess nutrients. But also you're going to have to be topping it up every 2 weeks for the best results. Whereas with the pellets, you can actually just leave them, and you'll only need to top up the pellets when you see that the pellets have disintegrated. So you actually won't be able to notice the pellets in the soil anymore, and that's probably only going to be in 2 to 3 months. So that's why at the beginning of the potting season I always just add a little sprinkling of pellets, because I know that it's going to be a long-term sustained release of nutrients. Right, so I'm going to post a picture of this guy in a month or 2 and we're going to see the difference.